So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to dive into this first story, which is about Gavin Newsom. Now, Gavin Newsom has been one of the names that has been mentioned as a possibility that if Joe Biden were to decide not to run as president, that he would be one of the politicians that many pundits in DC think would be a good option. Now, one of the things about Gavin Newsom that has been happening, I would say within the past year, he did come out publicly and support Medicare for all. Now, why is that important? Hold on to that, because recently, while everyone has been discussing this option of Gavin Newsom running for president in 2024, which he said he's not going to, there is something that Gavin Newsom has been doing behind the scenes in California that I want people to be aware of. It turns out that Gavin Newsom just vetoed over 100 bills in California. Let's go ahead and get into this article here. Now, this is from the San Francisco. This is a local outlet here. Gavin Newsom just vetoed over 100 California bills. Here are some of them. So obviously, we're not going to get into all 100 of them tonight. But there are a couple I do want to focus on. The fate of hundreds of bills passed by the California legislature was decided over the weekend. Governor Gavin Newsom went into the weekend with about 700 bills on his desk, and October 14th deadline to either sign those bills or veto them. He ultimately made decisions on more than half in a historic 2-day stretch. Cal Matters reported that the governor blew through about 150 on Saturday and then tackled about 320 on Sunday. However, amid rumblings about Newsom's future plans for higher office, an abnormal number of bills got the axe. Cal Matters said the governor sent 143 bills back to lawmakers, which translates to a veto rate of about 30% for the weekend. The outlet reported that Newsom vetoed just 169 bills total last year, signing 997 into law. Below are some of the more recognizable measures that Newsom declined to sign this weekend. And I just want to bring this to your attention. Oftentimes, local legislature will put forth bills. Maybe some of these have been ballot initiatives that citizens in that state voted for. But there's always the possibility, particularly depending on which state you live in, where the governor can decide whether or not to pass those bills. The governor can decide to veto those bills, even though it's something that the citizens wanted. Here's one of the vetoes. No free condoms for California high schoolers. Senate Bill 541 would have made condoms available to all of the state's high school students for free. It would have also prohibited retailers from refusing to sell them. In a typical refrain, Newsom cited costs as a reason for his veto. With our state facing continuing economic risk and revenue uncertainty, it is important to remain disciplined when considering bills with significant fiscal implications, such as this measure, he wrote in his veto message. So no free contraception for high schoolers. It's interesting what they have money for and what they don't have money for. This one right here is also pretty key. A ban on caste discrimination is redundant, Newsom said. Authored by State Senator Aisha Wahab, a Democrat from Hayward, would have made California the first state in the nation to ban caste discrimination. Now, let's remember, it was actually Seattle City Councilor Kshama Sawant that actually pushed forth a ban on caste discrimination in Seattle, and they won. Right. So I wasn't as familiar about, caste discrimination. I knew that this was something that did happen within India. What I didn't realize is that this is still something that continues today. So for someone like Kshama Sawant, this is especially important for people like her and her community. But Gavin Newsom feels that this is actually redundant. Now, it goes on to say, Wahhab's bill sought to add caste as a subset to existing state law that bans discrimination based on ancestry. In his veto message to lawmakers, Newsom said existing anti-discrimination laws made the bill redundant. Equality Labs, an Oakland-based group pushing to end caste discrimination, said this moment still represents a victory. This is the first state bill caste-oppressed people organized and built amazing power and awareness on this issue. Now, that's coming from the group in a statement. And one of the things that I did learn, particularly when Shama Sawant pushed this forward in Seattle, was that apparently your surname even matters in reference to caste discrimination. So I played a video on this channel before a while back when I covered that story, where there was a guy explaining like how this works, why people can tell what class he is just based on the surname that he has. So that was really interesting. Here's the other one for those of you that like to smoke a little doobie doobie doo. No cannabis cafes. Pot smokers won't be able to buy coffee or other foods from California's cannabis lounges after Newsom vetoed a proposed cannabis cafe law, which would have allowed pot lounges to sell food and coffee, as well as host ticketed events in the consumption spaces. The bill passed with overwhelming support in both the Assembly and the Senate, and supporters said it would provide a financial lifeline to California's struggling pot shops. So essentially, this was another way for those cafes to make more money. So, for example, if people weren't trying to go in there to buy the green stuff, they could get coffee or they could get like carrot cake or something like that. It also increases their revenue because while you're there getting a little doobie doobie doo, you may get a little hungry and decide, I want to get a brownie or I want to get a piece of carrot cake as well. So this one was just kind of weird to me. I didn't understand why he would not pass this, but it goes on to say in his veto, Newsom said he was concerned this bill could undermine California's long-standing smoke-free workplace protections. That doesn't really make sense to me because I feel like people who do not want to be, within the vicinity of smoke, whether it's cigarette smoke or whether it's the doobie-doo smoke, they're not going to go to that type of cafe to get food. They're just going to go to regular cafes that don't have cannabis, right? So to me, that was just really weird. This is the big one, though, guys. Mr. I'm in favor of Medicare for all. This one hits home for a lot of people, particularly those of you that have to take insulin. Capped insulin prices rejected. Senate Bill 90 would have capped the out-of-pocket cost of insulin at $35 for a 30-day supply. The cap would have included deductibles and co-pays. The bill's author, State Senator Scott Weiner of San Francisco, called Newsom's veto a missed opportunity to ensure people can afford their medicine. Newsom said he vetoed the bill because of the state's plan to produce its own insulin, which he said will negate the higher insurance premiums that companies will inevitably charge because of a copay cap. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Gavin Newsom is saying that the reason why he vetoed this bill is because California has its own plan to produce its own insulin for the citizens. The question that I have, though, what do people who are diabetic, what do they do in the meantime? It also sounds like to me, like I want to know this whole state's plan to produce its own insulin. Who are those companies that plan to produce that? Is Gavin Newsom in bed with those companies? Do those companies donate to Gavin Newsom? And is that why he's deciding to say, no, let's veto that bill and let me support those companies that do donate to me? Because that's what it kind of sounds like to me. And the question still remains, If you support Medicare for all, and like I said before, it's not enough to support it anymore. When they say they support these things, are they really going to fight for it? You have people that are diabetic that need their insulin. You have people that are diabetic, particularly elderly people that ration their insulin because they can't afford it. So here is Gavin Newsom basically telling residents in California, suck it up for now, and you have to wait until the state produces its own. So it sounds like to me, Gavin Newsom is still in the pocket of big pharma. And if you're in the pocket of big pharma, then you don't support Medicare for all. There's just no way. Doesn't make any sense. Let's go on. Earlier this year, the state signed a 10-year, $50 million contract with the nonprofit pharmaceutical company Civica RX. The cost of the state brand of insulin, a part of California's Cal RX initiative, will reportedly be capped at $30 per 10 milliliter vial and at $55 for a box of 5 pre-filled pen cartridges. The state is expected to make the insulin available next year. So again, like I said, what do people do in the meantime? Let's go on to the housing issue. Social housing, still just a pipe dream. Assembly Bill 309 would have established a state agency aiming to build and manage affordable housing on land owned or leased by the state. People from all socioeconomic backgrounds could apply to rent or own the properties. And Assembly member Alex Lee, a Democrat from San Jose, said the goal was to cap rent or mortgage payments to no more than 30% of a person's monthly income. In his veto message to lawmakers, Newsom said the bill would be too expensive to implement and could potentially cost the state several $100 million in capital expenditures. Let's talk about something for a second. California has the largest homeless population in the country. California, his state. Now, here was a bill to create more housing from people from all different incomes. Gavin Newsom said this is going to cost the state too much. This is too expensive. So the homeless problem continues. Like, again, these are things that the bills that I'm reading off to you, these are bills that were already passed. They passed in the House, they passed in the Senate. And so Gavin Newsom doesn't want this to happen. So I ask again, when it comes to donors, is Gavin Newsom in the pocket of big developers and real estate? Because it goes on to say here, when he ran for governor, Newsom claimed he would lead an effort for 3.5 million new housing units by 2025. Which is just around the corner. As Cal Matters noted earlier this year, he is nowhere near hitting that goal. And this is another example of people saying a lot of good things when they're running for office, but then once they're there, they don't fulfill those plans. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gavin Newsom is in the pocket of real estate. This is why following the money is so important. Here's another one. This is another cannabis one, so we'll switch to another one. This one. Bill to provide hearing aids for kids fails again. Senate Bill 635 would have required health plans to cover the cost of hearing aids up to $3,000 per individual hearing aid for those under 21. The bill, authored by State Senator Caroline Menjivar of LA and Anthony Portantino of Burbank, is a revamped version of an older bill, which was also vetoed. Newsom said he vetoed the bill again because the costs incurred by the new law might set a troubling precedent. A pattern of new coverage mandate bills like this could open the state to millions to billions of dollars in new costs to cover services related to other health conditions. Now, what does that tell you right there? That part right there at the bottom, where he says this could actually torpedo into the pressure of the state having to cover other medical costs. What that tells you is that Gavin Newsom is not going to try to push for Medicare for all. See how people reveal themselves by the way that they veto and pass legislation? He just gave the game away. Because when he tells you that, oh no, if we pass these hearing aids for these kids, that means people might ask us to cover other medical costs, which means when he said to people that he supports Medicare for all and he supports cow care, that means that Gavin Newsom is lying to you. I guess they don't want to give the kids hearing aids. And we'll touch on this one as well. Psychedelic decriminalization defeated for now. Magic mushrooms will remain illegal in California after Newsom's Saturday veto of Senate Bill 58, a bill that would have decriminalized the use and possession of psychedelic drugs like mushrooms. The bill's supporters said the government should not be criminalizing drugs that have shown significant potential for treating mental health conditions. Newsom said he did not want to sign the bill because it did not create guidelines, that term, guidelines around the medical use of the drugs. He added that he was committed to working with the legislator to write legislation that would decriminalize and authorize the use of drugs in the future. And to that one, I have to ask, is Gavin Newsom in the pocket of the police state? Because typically those who don't approve of decriminalizing drugs, those politicians, typically they're getting money from police unions. So these are things that people need to pay attention to. So there's a lot of talk about the possibility of Gavin Newsom running for president. And I think it's important that people pay attention to how he is governing the state of California, because what he's doing in California, that's what you would probably get if he ran for president. Something to pay attention to.